The compliance requirements related to an acquisition rehab for a tax credit property are fairly complex. There are some things that we need to know, some fine point rules in order to avoid non-compliance on the one hand and also to maximize the flow of tax credits to the investors and the owners. For all of these reasons, there are several questions that we need to ask. In this series of videos, we're discussing 2 questions that must be asked well ahead of an acquisition rehab in order to successfully manage compliance. Now, when I said that these should be asked ahead of time, I mean well ahead of the acquisition of the project. So last video we discussed the importance of the question, when will an acquisition occur? In this video we'll discuss the second of the 2 questions, which is, will this be a multi-building project or not? Now, for compliance purposes, every tax credit building will be either part of a multi-building project or it will be a project all on its own. It doesn't matter if the building is part of a bigger development or if a project shares the same name. What is important is whether the owner elects to treat each individual building as part of a multi-building project or not. Now, this election is made by the owners on a tax form. It's line 8B of Form 8609. Now, this form is submitted to the IRS when tax credits are begun to be claimed for a property. Now, if this election is made to include one or more buildings into a multi-building project, we're going to have an attachment to the 8609 that lists which building or buildings are part of that multi-building development. Now, there are a couple of very important reasons that this election is crucial to compliance. But for purposes of this video, we will focus on building transfers. Again, Chapter 4 of the 8823 Guide tells us that the IRS will allow qualified residents to transfer from one unit to another in 2 different buildings without having to requalify, as long as they don't exceed 140% of the current income limits. They just take their qualified status with them to the new unit, and the 2 units simply switch status. However, all of that is only true if both of the buildings are part of the same multi-building project as designated by their forms, the Form 8609s for each building. These simple transfers will not be allowed if 1, the buildings are not designated as part of a multi-building project per the 8609s, and 2, the buildings are not part of the same multi-building projects per the 8609 attachments. Now, if both of these conditions are not met, the household will have to requalify under the current limits at the time of transfer to the new building in order to qualify for tax credits in the new project that they're moving to. The rehabilitation of multi-buildings often necessitates transferring residents around the development. Sometimes many and unforeseen transfers are required. It's therefore crucial to know beforehand if each transfer will require a full initial certification and the risk that the household will not qualify to stay, or if simple transfers with switching of statuses will be allowed. Generally, for resident retention and public relation purposes, the multi-building election is most desirable in the rehabilitation of a development with multiple buildings. There may be other factors at work, however, and the owners are the ones that will decide if they're going to treat the project as a multi-building project or not. It's critical to establish the intent of the owner in this regard before any transfers take place during an acquisition rehab. Not asking this question and planning accordingly, according to the answer that we get, can result in unqualified units at a project after transfers and the loss of tax credits, as well as the unnecessary disruption of residents' lives. As we stated at the beginning of our first video, failing to plan is planning to fail, and none of us want to do that. When approaching an acquisition rehab, Asking or neglecting to ask a couple of simple questions can make all the difference between success and failure. Good luck.